The salt air whipped around me, carrying the scent of the ocean, and something else, something dangerous. He stood there, silhouetted against the fiery Miami sunset, the same sunset that had witnessed countless promises whispered, and just as many broken. But this wasn't a promise I was making. It was a threat I was facing to everything I held dear. His name was Julian, and he was my husband's son. Do you think this was always going to happen? I ask myself that now, looking back. My gallery, Azure Dreams, was my creation. Years of meticulous planning, networking, and a relentless drive had built it into one of Miami's premier destinations for contemporary art. My husband, Ricardo, Rick to everyone else, was a silent partner, a real estate mogul who provided the capital, but the soul of the place was mine. I was 48, and the years had settled on me, gently. Rick and we'd been together for 12 years, a comfortable rhythm, a partnership. Was it the kind of passionate, soul-consuming love you read about? Maybe not, but it was real. Until Julian, Rick's son from a whirlwind romance in his youth. The word stepson always felt cold, distant, like a legal term, not a familial one. I hadn't raised him, but he'd been a presence in our lives, a polite, reserved young man orbiting our world. Now, at 25, he was different. Finished with his business degree, Julian was interning at Azure Dreams for the summer. Rick's idea, of course, a learning experience, a way to introduce him to the finer things. But there was something in Julian's eyes, a simmering intensity, a guardedness that made my breath catch. Do you ever get that feeling when you just know something is about to shift, even if you can't explain why? I did. That distance, that carefully maintained space between us, was what unnerved me the most. It wasn't hostility, it was anticipation, like he was waiting for a signal, a crack in the facade. And that was the terrifying part. I knew, deep down, that I was the one who might provide that crack. I always kept Rick close, a buffer, a reminder of the lines that shouldn't be crossed. The Art Basel Miami Beach trip was supposed to be routine, a whirlwind of exhibitions, client meetings, and schmoozing. Rick was meant to be there, the grounding force. But then, a last-minute crisis with one of his developments. "You two go ahead," he'd said, with that easy confidence that both attracted and infuriated me. "Julian needs the exposure, and you're the best teacher he could have, Emma." His words were innocent, a husband's trust, but a knot of dread twisted in my stomach. I saw Julian's gaze flick to mine. A fleeting moment, but it held a depth, an awareness that sent a shiver down my spine. He knew the effect he had. "Take care of him, Emma," Rick had said, a playful hand on my shoulder as he left for his emergency meeting. But who was protecting whom? I wondered. Maybe it wasn't Julian who needed protecting. Maybe it was me. Like and subscribe now to follow this enticing journey. That evening, as we reviewed the itinerary in our hotel suite overlooking Biscayne Bay, the conversation drifted. From the logistics of the art fair to him, his ambitions, his observations about the art world, his subtly probing questions about my life before Rick. His eyes weren't just listening, they were seeing. And every time our gazes locked, that familiar, unwelcome heat pulsed through me. Was it the reflection of the city lights in his eyes, or something else entirely? "You're different when he's not around," Julian said softly, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the room. "Like you're holding something back." My breath hitched. He was right. But the terrifying thing wasn't that he'd noticed. It was that I wanted him to. I wanted him to see the woman beneath the polished veneer, the woman who felt restless, trapped. Was this a midlife crisis, or something far more dangerous? What would you do in my situation? Let me know in the comments. The next day, the air at the convention center crackled with energy. Julian, surprisingly, navigated the crowds and conversations with ease. He was a natural, charming collectors and curators, his quiet confidence drawing them in. I watched him, a strange mix of pride and something else, jealousy, ridiculous. But I couldn't deny the sting I felt when a striking gallerist lingered a little too long, her eyes fixed on Julian. We were walking back to the hotel, the Miami heat pressing down, when my heel caught on a loose paving stone. A sharp pain shot through my ankle. I gasped, stumbling. Julian's arms were around me instantly, steadying me. "Are you okay?" His voice was laced with concern, but his eyes held something else, something that ignited a fire within me. I think I twisted it. I managed, my voice trembling. He helped me into the elevator, his arms still around my waist. The enclosed space felt suddenly too small, too intimate. I leaned against him, the pain in my ankle a distant throb compared to the heat of his body, the scent of his cologne. This wasn't just support. This was something else, something inevitable. He carried me into our suite and laid me gently on the bed. "I'll get ice," he said. I thought of things I shouldn't, felt things I shouldn't. "You can't run from this," he said, his voice low. "We can't." And when his thumb gently grazed my lips before he leaned in, before our lips finally met, I knew there was no turning back. That kiss was a dam bursting. All the carefully constructed walls, the justifications, the what-ifs, they crumbled under the weight of a desire that had been simmering for far too long. The night was a blur of whispered confessions, stolen touches, and a desperate attempt to ignore the looming consequences. We made love, recklessly, passionately, as if trying to consume each other before reality could intrude. I didn't want to waste any time. "Julian, you're very handsome, and I have to admit that I am attracted to you," I confessed, my body trembling. He responded by calling me beautiful, and I made a loud noise. I don't even remember. "I hope this hotel is well insulated," Julian said, a smirk playing on his lips. "You're going to need a lot of well-insulated hotels from now on," I replied, my body contracting. "What about after this?" Julian asked. "Did you really just say that?" I whispered that I did. "I guess this business trip is going to last a little longer," he said, and we just kept smiling. It was only the beginning, and I knew, deep down, nothing would ever be the same again. The morning brought the harsh light of truth. The guilt was immediate, a heavy weight settling in my chest. Julian, however, seemed unfazed, a subtle smugness playing on his lips. He was younger, less burdened by the wreckage we'd created. He spoke of possibilities, of a future, of us. But I saw only the ruins of my life. "This can't happen again, Julian," I said, my voice shaking. "It was a mistake, a terrible, beautiful mistake." He argued, pleaded, reminded me of the connection we'd forged, the undeniable chemistry. But I was resolute. I had a life, a husband, a reputation. Everything I'd worked for was on the line. The thought of Rick, his trusting face, his unwavering belief in me, was a knife twisting in my gut. The rest of the Art Basel trip was a torturous dance of avoidance and forced normalcy. I threw myself into work, burying my guilt beneath a flurry of meetings and negotiations. I avoided Julian as much as possible, my heart pounding every time our eyes met. He, in turn, watched me, a mixture of frustration and simmering desire in his gaze. He wasn't giving up. That much was clear. Back in Miami, the tension was unbearable. I knew I had to confess. The weight of the secret was crushing me. I chose a quiet evening, after Rick had returned from his business trip. He was relaxed, happy to be home, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I started slowly, tentatively, talking about the trip, about Julian, about the closeness that had developed. Rick listened, his smile fading, replaced by a growing unease. Then, I told him everything. The fall, the elevator, the kiss, the night, everything. The silence that followed was deafening. Rick's face was a mask of disbelief, then anger, then a profound, soul-crushing sadness. He didn't yell, didn't rage. He simply stared. That was worse. "Why, Emma?" he finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why him? Why now?" I had no good answers. I spoke of loneliness, of feeling unseen, of the intoxicating allure of forbidden desire. None of it sounded convincing, even to my own ears. The truth was, I didn't fully understand it myself. It was a moment of madness, a catastrophic lapse in judgment. Rick left that night. He didn't pack a bag, didn't say where he was going. He just vanished. I was left alone in our sprawling, waterfront home, surrounded by the ghosts of our shared life. The following weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, whispered rumors, and the agonizing process of dismantling my marriage. Azure Dreams, once my sanctuary, became a constant reminder of my betrayal. Rick, through his lawyers, made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with me. The business was split, the house sold. I lost everything. Julian, surprisingly, remained. He offered support, a shoulder to cry on, a promise of a new beginning. But I saw him differently now. The thrill of the forbidden was gone, replaced by a cold, hard reality. I saw the ambition in his eyes, the calculated way he'd inserted himself into my life. I realized with a sickening certainty that he'd been playing a game all along, a game I'd unwittingly participated in. I rejected him. Firmly, finally. "This was never about love, Julian," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "It was about power, and you won." He tried to protest, to claim his feelings were genuine. But I was done with lies. I walked away, leaving him standing in the empty shell of what was once my gallery. I moved away from Miami, starting over in a small coastal town, far from the glitz and glamour of the art world. I found a quiet job teaching art classes at a local community center. I was alone, but there was a certain peace in the solitude. I'd made a terrible mistake, destroyed my life, and hurt the man I'd once loved. But I'd also learned a harsh lesson, that true fulfillment comes not from fleeting passions, but from integrity, honesty, and self-respect. I never saw Rick again. I heard rumors through mutual acquaintances that he'd remarried, found happiness. I was glad for him. He deserved it. As for Julian, I occasionally saw his name in art magazines, his star steadily rising. He'd gotten what he wanted, in the end. But I knew, deep down, that his victory was hollow. He'd gained the world, but lost his soul. The final scene, as I remember it, is me standing on the beach, watching the sunset. The same fiery colors that had witnessed the beginning of my downfall. But this time, there was no one beside me, just the vast expanse of the ocean, and the quiet strength of a woman who had faced her demons, paid the price, and finally found a measure of redemption within herself. I was scarred, but not broken. I was alone, but not defeated. I had survived, and that in itself was a victory. This is how I live now. My story is a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most seemingly perfect lives can be shattered by a single, impulsive decision. It's a story about desire, betrayal, and the long, arduous journey towards forgiveness, both of oneself and of others. What did you think of my choices? Did I deserve the consequences? And what about Julian? Was he a victim of circumstance or a manipulative opportunist? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story compelling, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Your support means the world to us. We hope this story was able to keep you guessing and wanting more.